Good morning, and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep and transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group or catching this on your favorite podcast platforms on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Jamila Jamie, a 2-4 emotional manifesting generator, right angle cross of planning, also known as the Potion Lady. Hi, Jamila. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'd love for you to just start out by telling us, do we call you Jamila or do we call you Jamie? And how did all that relate to your human design story? Just dive right in. Hi.
All right. Perfect. So I really don't care which one I'm called. I usually say whichever flows off your tongue the easiest, because I have been called far worse in life. So if you get me with one of those, we're good. Or you would just hear people call me Jay or JJ because they give up. But, you know, it's really interesting. So my real name is Jamie, but in learning my human design and in studying different things, I started studying Sufism, and my sheikh gave me the name Jamila because they say there's 99 names of Allah, and each one and it's, you know, I love it because it's kind of like the human design chart, right? We all have the whole chart, so we all encompass all these qualities of God's source, but there's one we carry the most, and that's usually, you know, so if people convert to Islam or Sufism, like all of a sudden they come with this new name. So Jamila means the one who sees God's beauty in all things. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, yes, because, you know, I look back on life and it can be incredibly, you know, I could look at it and really be a victim, you know, and a poor me, or I can look at it from a space and be like, wow, like, look at the beauty that's in that. And that's kind of the stance, I guess you will say, or the outlook that I've always taken is just, anytime, you know, I just like to say, you know, get a handful, you know, life kind of gives you shit. And do you see the shit as shit? And it's like, oh my God, this is disgusting. Or is it fertilizer to plant the seed? I like to see it as the fertilizer that plants the seed, right? You know, so I love that that name was given to me. And I love how just even in giving the names, you know, it's like we all have all of them, you know, just like we all have all the chart. But yeah, my journey with human design. Whenever I tell these stories, I have to bring up my ex-husband. So thankfully we get along very well, and he actually studied human design as well, but he had gotten very sick at a point in his life with Lyme disease, and he had neurological Lyme disease. And even like, I'm in Maryland, and we have like some of the best hospitals here, and even Johns Hopkins Hospital, you know, like world renowned, basically gave up on him. And I'm like, why don't these people just understand? Like, he has Lyme disease. I've been telling them this for 2 years. This man has Lyme disease. So anyway, when we realized that we weren't getting the help for him to get better, I was just started searching everything on the internet. And somehow I came across a feng shui site, which then it was on page like 3 or 4 of Google search, which as a manifesting generator, I don't know about you, I'm not searching past page 1. If it's not on the first page and like maybe one of the first 5, forget about it. I'm not doing it. But it's something guided me to keep looking. So when I was on there, I found this lady's site, and she had this Angels Teach on there. And I'm like, for some reason, I was really, really guided to go there. So I went to the site and I saw they had this like introductory angel communication course. And I was like, we don't really have money for anything extra right now, because we had basically sold everything, you know, and trying to get him treatment. And it was just a crazy, crazy time. That I will digress in a whole other poverty story of how we were living those days. But anyway, in this training, I went and then I was able to take the next level, and I got introduced to human design. And I was like, wow, like, I know there's something here, but I wasn't necessarily, like, it wasn't clicking the way they were teaching it. And it was nothing wrong with the way they were teaching it. I knew I needed more. Well, lo and behold, they're friends with Karen, and they learned from Karen. So I was like, I'm just going to go straight to the source. So I went and I signed up for my first class there. And gosh, that was probably 2009. So I've been hanging out with Karen for about 15 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been a long time, but we giggle because I think it took me, we say, Karen says 5 years. I don't know that it was that long to actually like turn my camera on and ask a question. But in that, just learning my design and even why it took me a couple of years to turn my camera on. My conscious sun is gate 40 in line 2. So I can really retreat. I retreated so hard. I had to prove to the government who I was at one point in time.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, gate 40 is all about retreat and going inward, right? So yeah. And then in line 2, the hermit. So that makes so much sense, right?
That's it. And so it's really interesting how like I just started learning, even just learning I was a manifesting generator and what that meant was like so like it's like everything makes sense. And I did go through a time when I was like, oh my gosh, like because my chart has a lot of definition in it. And like even through the gates, I don't have a lot of repeating gates. So I have lots of channels, lots of gates, lots of definition, but I've always been really, really intuitive. So when I saw my chart, I was like, I got really sad because I was like, oh my gosh, you mean I'm not really intuitive? And I went down that whole thing. And then I realized not just how, where that shows in my chart and the ways that I am intuitive, which actually, really sparked me to even trust myself more. And I have a lot of logical circuitry as well. So I had to, like, my first experiment was proving to my logic that it was right to trust my intuition. And that was a fun time. But in that, just learning even that the choices that I make, even if they led me somewhere that didn't seem good or right at the time, and even if I would question it, I would be like, why did I feel to do this? Or, because I wasn't always using my sacral then. I was still getting used to, trusting it, but I always trusted my intuition. But my intuition, divinely, as we know, like lines up with my sacral responses, so just even in that, like back to the Jamila, like I'd keep getting in these places or situations that it's interesting because everybody on the outside would be like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. That's wrong. Don't do that. But I just had such a deep faith and trust. And then just seeing it play out in my chart and to see where I am now from where I was, it's like, you can't convince me that there's not something to this. People can take it as far as they want or as minimal as they want. I always say, as long as you know your type, just know, and even with my clients, as long as I know their type, if I just know how to ask them the questions in the right way, the magic that is in that. But, so I just literally I just started practicing, trusting my intuition, following my type and strategy. And knowing I was emotional was huge, huge, because I was on antidepressants from the time I was 18 till about 32, because I'm also very tribal. I have 3 tribal channels, and something had happened in life that I don't know, it was really weird. I just went into this depression, and I was always like, right, sunshine. I was always like sunshine and just happy and, joyful no matter what. But I couldn't figure out what it was because it didn't seem that much at the time. My mom and my stepdad were considering at the time getting divorced, and it just shattered me because I love my stepdad so much. He's my dad and my biological dad is daddy. And it really, it just rocked me to my core. And at the time, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was tribal. I didn't understand that, relationships and things like that really, really impact me. So that divorce, was just, even the talk of it, it devastated me. So it was really interesting looking back. And the more I started, just with my journey and then learning these tribal energies and learning that I am emotional, and that, relationships and, breakups or, any of the tribal things that aren't necessarily as good can really set that wave off. And to understand, especially with me having the 40-37 in my, conscious sun and earth, and that, being about contracts and agreements. And I also have 29 in Saturn. So it's like I said, yes, I committed. I have 29 and 59 Saturn.
I'm going to stop you for just a minute to slow down just a little bit, because we have some people who are listening to the podcast that don't know all these numbers. So when you throw out numbers, if you can just kind of give a little theme to it.
Sure.
Say it, that would be helpful. So like the 3740 you said was agreements, and that's about, between your will and your emotions and how those
Mhm.
connect. And the 29 is, do you want to just say how?
So the 29 is big about commitments. It likes to say yes. And when it says yes to something, even if it's the wrong thing, and with me having that will center that can, it's really about commitment and dedication. Like I will like overly commit and will my way through, if you will, with the willpower of the will center, will my way through. And the 59 is also there with that yes energy. And that's another gate that's all about, it's resources and it's family and it's tribal and it's not
Intimacy.
necessarily, yeah,
I have
so
that one 3 times. That's my design
oh,
one.
y-
So
yay. No, it can be really fun. It's just sometimes or not, right? But yeah, so it's just like learning all that for me, and this is just me. So please, I am not a doctor. I might do holistic things, but I am not a licensed medical doctor. For me, it just spoke to my soul and it was just in my gut to like, maybe I don't need the antidepressants. And I didn't, but that's me and my story. So please, if you're like, oh, I have this thing she just said in my chart, and no, because sometimes we do, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything I just said. So I just like to throw that caveat out there for me and my story and where I was in my journey. I knew it was time to just see. So I started easing back. I got off of them and I used homeopathy because I'm a naturopath as well. And I do a lot with homeopathy, with essences, with minerals. Um, using a combination of those, knowing my chart, knowing my design, I was able to get off of that and actually learn how to feel again. Because for
yeah,
me, I was very numbed. I didn't have, here I am, this emotional manifesting generator who had no emotion. And it's really interesting how, be it whatever your story is, of, if you have a story of learning to feel again, because, right, we're supposed to be happy and we're, don't be emotional, don't make a scene, don't cause a ripple, don't, none of the things, just be happy and think yourself happy and positive, and that's what you'll be. Now, I'm not saying there's not some truths to that, but there are such things as real chemical imbalances and real life, just traumas and happenings. And just, it doesn't even have to be trauma. Like, we're allowed to feel, but, so just getting to, and to know that expressing my emotions is a really big thing for me. And in my chart, seeing how, good, positive ways for me to express my emotions changed everything. It helped me just, reclaim my voice, reclaim my power, come home to me. And it was like, who would think that, like, I love when people say, oh, you're so emotional. I'm like, I know I am. Thank you.
right.
Like, yes, I am. Thank you for seeing me. And they're like, that wasn't a compliment. And I'm like, yeah, actually it is. So
Yeah, that's really a big thing that I've experienced through all this is, somehow we've all been taught, like, I think it's this whole idea of happily ever after. Well, how do we, like, if there's nothing to compare it to, then happy just starts to feel flat, right? Like we need the waves, we need the ups and the downs. And to learn, we learn from the contrast, right? We learn this feels better, this feels worse, and we find meaning in all of that. And so I think it's really cool how you were able to experiment with that, and that was able to take you off of the medication. And I experimented a little bit with the serotonin reuptake inhibitors when I was going through probably a lot of the hormonal shifts that come around 40s or, perimenopause stuff. And then when I realized that I have this deep melancholy in my chart, I have a lot of individual circuitry, and I have that 3955, the channel of emoting. And when I started to realize that the more I kept sitting there in my lows thinking, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way? Instead of, oh, what is this bringing me? And like, the more I resisted it, the more it stayed and the longer I stayed in it. And I was able to, I had already kind of stopped with them before I started human design. I only did it for a few years because it just always felt icky to me. But anyway, again, not saying that it doesn't work for some people, but really understanding my emotional wave. And I think for some people who do not have their own emotional wave, it can even be a bigger thing to understand how it works, because this feeling of like, why can't I control my emotions? Because you're amplifying other people's emotions. And when you understand that, I think it can really be liberating. But I want to back up to your story. So you found human design when you were dealing with the stuff, and you went, Karen was the first person you found, or and you started doing, I know I've seen you in, like, when I do training, some of the things I have some archived videos and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at Jamie with her short hair. And like, there was like some stuff, I'm like, that's got to be a long time ago, because I know how long your hair is, right?
Yeah.
So, and I remember there was a comment about you being on camera, like, so I knew that was nuts. And I was like, that was just so funny to me, because now you're on camera all the time. You run a lot of Karen's programs. The quantum alignment system is your baby now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And so talk to me, or talk to us a little bit about how that evolution really took place.
Yeah. So I love this story because I get to talk about my essences, which I know we'll get to, but
Okay.
yeah. So, along not just my own healing journey, but, again, I had my now ex-husband, his healing journey. I always believed there was something between the emotional and the physical. And I've always been so intrigued with, like, herbs and natural medicines. And I kept telling him one year, like, I want a homeopathy kit. I want a homeopathy kit. I want to actually study homeopathy. And he bought me a flower essence kit. And I was like, well, this is cool, but like, it's not what I asked for, right? The princess didn't ask for. That's not what I asked for, man. But, so, and I'm just digressing here, and then I'll swing it back around.
That's okay.
But so we, but eventually, and I did take the homeopathy and I really loved it. And then they were talking about the flower essences, and my teacher actually taught them as well. So I was like, you know what, let me study these things. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I was just so immersed and just, I don't know, taken, because like I said, I love flowers. I love, like, gardening was just one of the things that me and my mama did together. We pulled weeds back in back when I was growing up. I don't know about you, Kathy, but like, if you were stressed, you went outside, you got in the garden, and you pulled some weeds, or at least that's
And don't ever say you're bored because you were sent out with a dandelion digger to get the
right. Yeah, like,
you're bored. Here you go, honey.
so that's it. Yeah, so I grew up in that as well. So I just always loved the flowers. I always loved just being out in the sunshine, and my mama called them posies, and so it was just everything was always sunshine and posies, and it's kind of funny that she would say that, because that was always the end result to get to. Like, you were allowed to feel how you felt, but you couldn't wallow in it. Granted, now I know I have a wave and it has a certain day thing, but still also not getting hung up in it. So just those creative ways to just move the energy and create something beautiful in the meantime. And then, the essences, I was just so taken at how powerful they are and how much they really can shift our emotional state. And one of the first ones the first one I made was the Alchemist. And to this day, I think it's still my most powerful one. But I made one, I call it Liquid Sunshine. And it's amazing. I made it when I was really low on my wave. I didn't actually make it because I'm weird about that. That's just me. I actually like to craft things when I'm really low. But I formulated the recipe for it when I was really low. Because I thought, if I'm really low, like, I'm so in tune with the energy and the feelings that I want to shift. And that's actually one of the ways I move through my emotional waves now. Like, I always, like, if I'm guided, I'll craft a new formula, because because that's when I'm just most in tune with, again, what I want to shift. So anyway,
you craft it when your wave is higher, so you're giving higher frequency.
Yeah, and I know it's all about intention and things. I'm just one of those people, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just me. Like, I don't like to craft when I'm negative. I get real paranoid. Like, oh my gosh, what if I put negativity in this? Like, knowing that it's still made to counter, but like, I can't help it.
I get it though. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But so so when I did that, right, because I made this one essence particularly because I was on my wave, I was like, holy smoke. And it was magic, or at least I thought it was magic. And I'm like, holy
So-
smokes, like I'm on my way. And then I started, cutscene, Goodwill Hunting, the calculation board. And I'm like, I started thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, what about essences for the human design chart? And at this time, me and Karen were friendly, but I was still more of a student. But I sent her a message one day, and at the time, I still wasn't necessarily trusting that like what's meant for me will be. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this huge idea, but I don't want to tell it to anyone because, oh my gosh, what if somebody takes it? So, and then I'm like, but I can trust Karen.
Right.
So I messaged her and I said, Karen, just tossing this noodle here. I was like, flower essences, human design chart. I didn't say anything else. I also didn't hear anything from her. And I was like, damn, I thought this was a really good idea. Like I felt it so deep. What I didn't know was in the meantime, Karen was creating what was then called Healing by Human Design, which is now the quantum alignment system. And like one day randomly, she messaged me back and she said, hey, you got time for a phone call? And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, but me, what did I do? I'm in trouble. I did something wrong. I wasn't even thinking about sending her that message. And she's like, hey, listen, I'm putting together this program. She's like, and you mentioned the essences. She's like, and I was actually thinking about incorporating them. She's like, how would you like to craft me some around these 9 resiliency keys? And I was like, oh my goodness. And back then she wasn't really like teaching the resiliency keys. She's had them forever, but you know how she is. She's probably got 25 years worth of ideas that she's
Right.
worked on that are just sitting there. So I wasn't, like overly familiar with the actual outline of them. And she didn't tell me anything because she does that to me. In love, she'll be like, no, just do it. She's like, use your magic. Like,
Right.
She's like, just trust it. She's like, I just know that like you're meant to make these for me. And I said, okay. But then I'm thinking like, no pressure. But I did. And they turned out pretty freaking amazing. I still use the original recipes. And that was 6-7 years ago now, I think, that we came out with that.
Can I have you back up? And, I know that flower essences are pretty popular now. They're getting more popular, but there's still a lot of people who, I know when I first was exposed to the idea of them, I did not know that flower essences don't smell like flowers. I didn't know the difference really between an essence and an essential oil. So just briefly, like what's the difference and why would you want a flower essence that doesn't smell versus a essential oil that has this nice fragrance?
So for me, and I don't get me wrong, I love oils.
Mhm.
I'm just guided to work with the essences. So what the essence is and why it doesn't smell is it's literally the energetic imprint of a flower. So it's energy medicine. Essential oils have a physical component to them because they're actually, physically either the oils are either, compressed or there's some kind of, distillation process or something that happens where there's still more of like an actual physical chemical component to it, where the essences are literally just energy. And everything I do basically is energy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I will use my herbs and I will use oils, but in my practice, I consider myself an energist. So the homeopathy is energy medicine. The way I use minerals, I use them in cell salts, which is an energy form, because I'm really big on treating the energy body. So I just like, for me personally, I like the, just using the energetics of things, the frequency of things. And again, it's not that the oils and other things aren't amazing. They absolutely are. But just in my own work. And I'm just guided to just the energetics of things. So it is funny that I've gotten emails and they're like, I think you forgot to put the essence in here. It doesn't smell. And I'm like, no, it won't. Because the way they make them is they literally will, you can either just do it like side by side where you sit water right next to the plant, or they literally will just like you put the plant in a crystal bowl and the sun, kind of, and you do it during the sun, unless it's a moon one. But, in theory, then the sun kind of cooks the, and imprints the energy of the flower into the water. And then that's what creates your essence. And it's so funny because it doesn't seem like the summit might not seem like it would be a thing. And I actually have some mentors that, outside of Karen that are like, they're, foo-foo, it's not a real thing. It's not possible, but they actually do have frequencies to them. I'm excited because I'm working on a project that involves the frequencies of the essences and my little teaser. But yeah, so that's going to be fun.
Okay, I'm going deeper into your essences because anybody who saw my post, I don't know if anybody can see, I've got my little bottles back here. I just got my first batch I've got the 9 resiliency keys, and 10th one is called the pineal opener, which is used when we do the dream seed question in quantum alignment system. And so I've been playing with them a little bit. And so I'm really curious now as you're talking about this, and I have heard you talk somewhere. I don't know if it was on a video or in, training or whatever, or somewhere I've known about. I have another friend, Shannon Kinney Dew. I don't know if you know her. She's trained with Karen, but she's been making her own flower essences as well. So it might have been something she told me, but the idea of how you put the flower in the water or buy it and that sort of thing, and with the energy of the sun. And I'm wondering right now with all these intense solar flares, how does that impact your essences?
I like to say I'm like super powered. Yeah, I do take into consideration though sometimes like if the energy so it can be really uplifting. It can really give us that boost and be extra initiating. Depending on what I'm making, I'm cautious only because if I have some that are a little more I just feel like this one's going to be a little more intense, I might not necessarily do it if I know it's a day that there's a ton of, some of these days lately, the flares have just been nonstop and they've been big and they've been long. So I might avoid then. Other times though, I'm like, no, this is the time. So really everything I do is a very intuitive process. I have the 2946, which is a channel in the chart. It's a sensing circuit. So it's embodiment and feeling in the body and feeling the, it's not an empath like the solar plexus where you're feeling the emotions of, those around you or possibly things. But it's it's funny because it's defined, but yet in its definition, it senses the energy of things or people or, so it's like a splitting of hairs there between the emotions and the energy of things. So I just learned to really feel into the energy. Sometimes it's really funny. I was like, wow, I was guided to make I think it was a solar eclipse, which I don't necessarily think it's bad to craft under solar eclipses. But I was like, this is weird that I'm being asked to craft with this 51 sun, this really and just the collective energy. But something guided me to just go out there and set some water out and set it by this one flower. And I'm like, okay. And it's still sitting there because I guess it's just acting as some kind of anchor or portal for the energy. And I'm literally not allowed to touch the bottle yet because that's just what I feel.
Outside by the flower, and then
it's still outside by the one.
A closed water bottle, then, or
yeah. Well, for that one, I'm sorry, my dog likes to kick me out of my chair.
Your dog is so cute. Tell us your dog's name for those of you who are watching this on video.
Yeah, his name is McTavish Thaine, and I call him the Judgment King. He's my absolute soul bomb, but he looks at me like I am life's biggest disappointment. It's hilarious. Yeah, he was in the chair one day. I'll tell my quick little funny side story because the other person he does it to is Karen. If I'm on a call with Karen, he'll just sit in the background and be like,
really? You're talking to her?
Yeah. Yeah, and we had a team meeting and she started talking and he popped his head up and he's like, and she's like, McTavish Thaine, don't judge me. And then he just put his head back down. The timing of it, he's actually so sweet. Yeah, I got this nice chair and he has he lets me sit in it occasionally.
Yeah.
I'm actually sitting on my ottoman because
your sunshine chair. Well, I don't know if people can see it, but mine.
I like it too.
I have a yellow chair too.
I love it.
So
I love it.
We have quite a few similarities in our chart, even though you are a manifesting generator and I am a projector, and my emotional wave is individual and yours. But you and I both have the 2644, which I think relates to a lot of the things we're talking about. It's the channel of surrender. It connects the will, for those listening, it connects the will center, our heart, our resources, our heart of who we are, to our splenic awareness system. So it's this ability, a lot of times traditional human design just talks about how, it's this channel of the salesman, and But it's because the reason we are the salesman is because we know what people need. We can see it, we can feel it, and we can, when we're in integrity, convey it in a way that people can accept it and be open to it. And I think it's really a beautiful energy. And you and I share that energy. So that's cool. And then you and I also share the open head, the undefined head ajna. Although you're the opposite, you have the completely open head, crown center, and I have the completely open ajna. So I have the gate 64 on my, so lots of questions for me. And I remember, I don't know if you were on the call when Karen told me I was the cosmic ladle.
I love it.
Configuration. She's like, you just ask the questions and you're like, here's a question for you. Here's a question for you. And I've really embraced that and thought of how I give people the questions that can then sometimes bring them the clarity. But I think that 2644 energy really helps to add to all of that. So I just was noticing that in our,
I will
and
say,
then we also,
I was going to say, I have the 4 on my undefined ajna, which is all about the answer. So it's like, oh, you can ask me the questions because I like to give answers.
yeah, but
take them up.
And in the lower frequency, that gate 4 though can really be an energy of that I can see where the shift in that gate, I think, is really powerful because the low expression of that energy is all, as I understand it, is all about having to have the answer. And so sometimes rationalizing answers and making up stories to have an answer, just so you have some certainty in an answer when you really don't even know what you're talking about necessarily because you haven't sat with the question long enough. You haven't been curious, gone deep enough, but you need an answer. And that's in that, how we sometimes need that certainty in our undefined ajnas. And so that gate 4 energy, I think, can make both any of those, any gate, when you really shift from the unbalanced expression to the higher expression, can be a big shift. But for some reason, I feel like when they're in the ajna or the head center, it like kind of almost like it regulates everything else, right? When we shift.
And I will say, because one of the biggest things I'm just most passionate about, and I kind of got from the essences, and is emotional, resiliency, and it was also interesting for me to find that a gate 4, especially when it's hanging, is actually can correlate with, social anxiety, right? Because if you're around people and you need that answer, so probably really, excuse me, anything in there could feel that same sense of, because if the urgency is mistaken for anxiety, you might find that over time, if it's staying in that lower expression and trying to figure out and not really trusting itself or trusting the timing, to wait for the answer to come, it can really start causing some anxiety and really get some mental chatter looping up there that can be, just wanting that certainty so bad, or to have that answer so bad, or to be able to rationalize so bad.
So let's go back a little bit into your story, because we got deep into the potion lady part of it, which I get is a key part of how you wound up in the position you are with the quantum alignment system. But how I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you went from being the person who was afraid to turn on their camera to the person who is running the quantum alignment system.
Right. So which part of it is practicing and repeating the quantum alignment system? It's honestly, so I have, for those who aren't familiar, I have the gate 48. It's a gate that can carry a fear that doesn't know enough. So we like to collect a lot of certificates. I have a lot of certificates and a lot of trainings, one of which is I'm an EFT. I can train people in EFT. And so EFT was another modality that I had come across that I found really just personally profound. And ironically,
for people,
tapping, and I just found it really profound, and I didn't realize that Karen was also incorporating that into the quantum alignment system. So, which is a beautiful blend of, it's some energy psychology modalities, but the main 3 I would say are, looking at the chart, EFT tapping, and the flower essences. So, and I just kept repeating the process. Every class she, taught. I was there. I wasn't working for her at the time. And then I started taking over. I started getting more courage, and I started really just talking and asking questions and getting answers. And I just kept showing up. Like, I just kept showing up for me. I kept showing up for the courses, because I was also taking, then it was still traditional human design. She was teaching. I was, doing the traditional human design with her. And then one day she asked me, did I want to start doing forums? And I was like, oh my God, like I freaked out. But I was like, oh yeah. I was like, you know what? I asked my sacral and it told me yes. And I was like, shh. I'm like,
But that sacral gets you.
yeah, I know. I'm like, don't, this is wanting to know, just no. But it told me, and at the time Cindy was still there, and Cindy has, a very provocative and penetrating incarnation cross, and she used to scare the tar out of me. But I realized when she scares me, she's, just provoking me to do things that are right for me, but are uncomfortable for me. So it feels.
You remember what her incarnation cross was?
She is, it's the one, I don't remember the name, but she has the 38 and 39 sun and earth with the 45 and the 21.
That's my dog. That is like, I attract them like flies on honey, or flies on something else. I mean, like, but that's the cross attention. My daughter has.
Yeah. Well, so you understand how it can make.
Well, assuming she's right angle, it's cross attention. So it depends on.
Yeah, I think she's right angle.
The left angle, right? Yeah,
I
forget what it is in the other, but I track those two.
Yeah. So, and it's funny, and I actually some of the first classes I started teaching outside of. I mean, it was still within the material, but like on my own was with Cindy, because I knew that. And that's why I think it's so beautiful when you really start learning this stuff and learning others' energies and charts, how they work, that like whenever Cindy asked me to do something uncomfortable, or, suggested something like that came uncomfortable, or maybe just want to be like, no, it was usually a yes. But,
that's the tension in the cross of tension.
Yeah.
It's here to push us to be better and to be our full self, right?
Yeah.
So many people, with that cross, there's a learning curve to like feeling like, okay, I'm not just here to knock people over or then be afraid of my power and not do anything. I have to find that balance, right? So
anyway. Yeah. So thanks to Cindy and her making me uncomfortable in my sacral, I started doing forum, and I was, not necessarily teaching, but just speaking more in the trainings around, healing by human design / quantum alignment system, because I was explaining the essence of some in there. And then, and in that, mind you, at the time, I'm an agoraphobic. There's a whole other story there. I
thought I remembered that you, at the beginning, you were not leaving your house at all, right?
No, I would not leave. I didn't leave my house unless it was an absolute emergency pertaining to my son for almost 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was literally just through learning my design, the tapping, the essences, the homeopathy, just showing up and doing. I don't know. I still, to this day, I don't necessarily question it, but there is like a beautiful magical sorcery within the quantum alignment system, I feel. And just the transmission of the work and doing it. Like, I just kept doing it and peeling back layer by layer. And for me, the layer, to kind of break free of the agoraphobia, if you will, because I always knew, I didn't know how, but I just knew, as crazy as it sounded, again, right? Because I roll with it 12 years. I just knew one day I was going to wake up and it was going to dissolve. Like, I just knew one day I was going to wake up and it was going to be gone. And that doesn't logically make sense, because I wasn't taking any other, any medications for it. And again, I'm not knocking it. This is just my journey and part of my learning for even just the work that I do. Although I'm no longer telling this hero, like, I don't need to have this hero story to be wonderful in my job. But at the time I thought I did. So I had apparently manifested this really big story, and I did. But what took it was getting the courage to ask for a divorce. Which, again, I'm an agoraphobic. I don't leave the house. I don't have a job. I was blessed to be a stay-at-home mom, so I could study and do the things, but I didn't really have a business going at the time other than the essences, but I wasn't really pushing them or doing a whole lot with them outside of quantum alignment system. And, so it was just really interesting how, like, this thing that seemed impossible, that made no sense, that, because me and my ex-husband had some, some things, and it was funny, it was actually at the beginning, and I just tried, right? I made that commitment and agreement in my own marriage. So I was just going to ride it out. I was willing my way through so much and I didn't even realize it, because even at that time, I didn't realize that I was afraid that if I got out of the house, I would leave. I would ask for the divorce. And again, I made this commitment, and I have all this tribal energy. So like it was just so just freaking hard to
and the
do.
gate of saying yes, you have that channel, right?
Yeah. I mean, I said, yes, I committed to it. We made an agreement, a legally binding agreement at that. And then the other tribal energy in there as well. And and the crazy thing is me, my son, and my ex-husband all have the 59-6, which is, it's a channel that's all about resources and procreating. It's funny because like war lives there, sex lives there. It's the whole procreation, birthing the child, raising the child, providing resources the whole way through. And, so it's not just like sex, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's the whole process, right? Which life and death is in there. And it can feel really life and death. Asking for a divorce felt very life and death, because how was I going to sustain myself? How was I going to, I wasn't even leaving the house. Like I wasn't leaving the house. I was not hireable, because at that time the job market was just getting, it was pretty tight. And I had all this training, but at the time my story was I didn't have a college degree. So how could no one would hire me, not hire me in a job that would pay the bills and sustain and support me and my son. Now, granted, obviously I received support from my ex-husband once I finally said I want the divorce. And, it's funny because it was very amicable. And with him also taking human design training, we did divorce by design. It was perfect. He's a generator. I'm a manifesting.
There's a course for you.
Yeah. Yes. And I was amazing. Like the blessing of two sacral beings, honestly, that got married and are getting a divorce. We wrote out the list of everything. And we only answered with our sacrals because nothing was personal. It was all energetic, and our sacrals agreed on every single thing.
Wow.
It was so painless and effortless. And, and to this day, I mean, we're definitely like, this isn't our first rodeo together. There's some kind of thing, so we're still very amicable and we get along, but I was so.
Would it be like karmic thing? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I think we're just some kind of karmic, but the contract was just, for this part, and that our marriage, like it was, that chapter is done. But I was so great because now I'm a manifesting generator woman, and I'm taking back my power, and I'm just, I'm going to do it all on myself. And I needed his freaking support still. Oh, I hated it. I was so mad. I was so mad that I still had to depend on him. But then my one other mentor, she had told me, she's like, she's like, we don't always like the way that God brings us what we need. But have you thought about just being grateful that your needs are met? She's like, even if it's not, not the way that you want them to be met. And I was like, well, shit, now she's right too. Why can't everybody just be wrong and just let me feel how I'm feeling? Which they did, but they just kind of giggled at me because they're like watching me have this temper tantrum of not being able to support myself. But meanwhile, I was supported.
Right.
I followed my type, my strategy, my authority, and I was supported. The universe had me, God had me, and supported me so that I could start, finding a job. And I did. But all right. Hey, I don't want to dive too deep into this because it's so advanced. I do have a near death chart that is a 1-3. So I have definitely been experiencing the third line, experimenting imprint in that. So I was experimenting with a lot of things. I forgot that I do have a defined will, which when your will center is defined, it works to rest. So it needs time off. I literally worked every day, 2 jobs for a year without a day off. And I realized that probably wasn't the best. So I was like, all right, universe, like, for me, it's God. So I'm like, okay, God, like, I know I'm doing too much, but I have to pay these bills. Can you please just start aligning me, bring me closer to where my next step, where I'm meant to be. Now, mind you, I have always in the back of my mind, and I think a lot of us do, we really do dream of working for Karen. And in my mind, like I was like, if I could just work for her these many hours at this hourly pay, I could quit all this stuff. I could quit all of it. But I just kept on, and I was getting so miserable because I was starting to burn out. And I just kept saying, and especially at this time, at this one job, it was just getting like, and I just kept every morning, I would wake up and I would just say, God, thank you for allowing me to have my foot one step closer out the door, because I know you're opening something for me. God, thank you. Thank you for letting me have one step closer, out the door, because I know you have something better waiting for me. And then a chiropractor who actually worked next door said, hey, do you want to come work for me? And I was like, mm-hmm. And I was like, all right. So I was like, well, it's not Karen, but okay. Like, it's something, it's better money. The hours were a little weird, but it still was not 2 jobs. It was one, and it was paying me what those 2 jobs were, but it still wasn't enough to do it on my own. I still kept thinking, like, man, just Karen would like this Karen thing. Cause I felt it different, like I really just felt it different. So it wasn't like, Karen, come rescue me. But I felt it, and I was, doing more. And then and actually at one point I had stopped doing the forums, and then she invited me back to do the forums because she, Karen, she got a wild hair. She's like, no, I think I'm going to go back to doing forum. And I was like, all right, so, but then she's like, okay, it's just not feeling time, can you come back and do forum? And I was like, sure. And then I broke out the spray I mentioned first, the Alchemist. So I have an essence. It's called the Alchemist. It's I am that I am. Right. So I was and every time I use this thing, like if you're in alignment and there is something that you want to manifest, like, I don't know what the magic is, but it's there and I'm not even questioning it. I actually used it on my coworker at the chiropractor. She's like, I really need a new car. She's like, and I so bad want, I just wish I could get a Jeep. And I just happened to have the essence with me, and I was looking for the sunshine one because I was still like, I just need a pep. And I pulled it out, and she's like, what's that? And I was like, oh, I make these essences, yada, yada. She used it. Within a week, she had her dream Jeep. She's like, I can't believe it. I don't get it. Like, I use that. She's like, I know it's using that thing. Help. She's like, I got my Jeep, Jay. I got my Jeep. She's like, and I don't know, like, I shouldn't have been able to get this Jeep, and they worked the financing, and I can do it comfortably. And I was like, you know what? Why am I not using my own thing? Because how many times do we do that? We have all these beautiful tools and modalities and creations, and we don't use them. I was like, you know what?
Physician, heal thyself, right? Isn't it?
Right, exactly. Right? And I'm like, I was like, and I wasn't even asking for Karen, because I see it when we go to manifest, when we go to create and feel into things. Like, thinking about Karen hiring me at that pay, at those many hours, felt like it really lifted my vibration, but I was open to however form it came. So I started using that essence with it. A week later, I get a message from Karen on a Sunday that said, hey, can you be my assistant? Do you want to be my assistant? And I just typed, like, I didn't even say yes. No, I just literally.
You didn't write it. You didn't wait for the wave on that one, huh?
I didn't. And I
waited on it for years.
Yeah. And it wasn't like this deep gratitude. Oh my God, thank you so much for thinking of me. Let me write my waving it back. I was just like, It was literally my 5-letter, 2-word response to her. And I was like, well, at least my sacral answered, but I kid you not. She said, well, this is what I can do. I can give you this many hours and pay you this much. And it was exactly
what you'd been manifesting,
what I needed, what I was thinking about. And then, but you know how it is in Karen land, like, come on. And it was such a fit that, like, we started growing more, things started picking up, there was more work. So she's like, hey, can you just come full time? And I'm like,
right.
Right. And so it's been beautiful. And I started as her assistant, and then just things shifted and transitioned and we're unfolding. And then we, opened up the CMM program at that time, the Coach Mastermind. And she's like, and she knew, she's like, you're so much more than an assistant. She's like, this is just a way that I can get you in. And that's one thing I appreciate about her. And maybe it's that 4th line. Oh, I'm sorry. My dog is now moving my computer for us. The 4th line, right? We don't always see the potential in us or what it is. It's just a weird energy thing. If you have a 4th line that can happen there, like, I know my worth, I know my value, I love me, but I still don't always necessarily, and I think it's true for anybody, we don't necessarily see ourselves the way another does. But she's always seen my potential. And she's like, you're so much more than an assistant. So don't limit yourself to this is what you are. She's like, are you good at it? She's like, yes, very. She's like, but is this, but you're more than like this position. Like, this isn't aligned for you. She's like, you're doing really good. She's like, I don't mean it that you're not. So then when that role came open for director of the Coach Mastermind, she's like, all right, let's put you here. So I was still assisting some, and then, just started really stepping into my leadership and all this again. I'm just still doing the system. I'm still tapping. I'm still using my essences. I'm still just following, type, strategy, authority, being aware that when triggers come up where it may be coming from in my chart, and just, tapping on that or following through with the quantum alignment system, on that. And, finally just the universe conspired and it lined up for me to step into the director role, which just, it almost feels like coming full circle because I was literally there from the beginning before it was even taught. So to be here with it now and have, just practice it for so many years. I also have the 1648, which is a channel that can be about mastery. And there tends to be a 10-year cycle with mastery, so even having like the 10 years to hone the mastery of it. And I'm sorry, the dog is back. Come on.
We're gonna call him up, huh?
Yeah, there he is. Yeah, he wants the blanket. I'm sorry, he just like bombs everything.
He's like behind you. He's hiding. Is he a
there
second line dog?
He has to be. Look, you're boring him, Kathy.
Right?
You're putting him to sleep already. Look, I see
He's like, are we done yet? I think it's time to go outside. He wants to go check the yard. Okay, so now, there are a couple things that, came up, and I don't want to go too deep into things you don't feel comfortable talking about, but you mentioned just kind of off the cuff a near-death experience, and I'm wondering when that was and if that's something that is pertaining to the story or not.
Actually, yes, because the energy of that near-death experience, I died having my son, which I love to remind him if he gives me a hard time. I died to have you. I literally died having you, right?
Wow.
So I did. He came 2 weeks early, so it was funny. I didn't realize I was in labor, and I just like, I don't.
How old is he now? How long ago was this?
He's 19. So,
okay.
Yeah, about 19 and a half years ago. He'll be 20 in October. I still can't get over the fact that he's an adult. But so, which I giggle once I learned human design because I'm like, why on earth did this kid choose to be born now? Like, why didn't he wait 2 weeks? It was a much gentler everything. His conscious sun is the gate 28. His both south nodes are the gate 28. And the gate 28 can be challenged, right? It can be adventure, but it can really have the struggling challenge about it. So under the triple 28 energy, this child was born and I died, which I crack up because if you think about me having that 37 in my earth, which is a very harmonic peace, seeking just
gate of peace.
Yeah, peace and harmony.
And family.
Right? And then here comes this kid straight out the gate, triple 28. So my near-death chart, obviously has the same. So we, I giggled at like, I call him JJ for Jamie Jr. because he's only a 3 center defined generator. He has the 5734, and he loves music and music production. And we kind of tend to call that, say that's a keynote, right? This is the music producer channel. And then again, he has the 59-6. So he has the spleen, the sacral, and the emotional or creative soul.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah, just goes through the gate of power up to the intuition, gate of intuition. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then
and he has the gate 19, which is, very attunement and in tune with feeling everything. And my chart is kind of loud. Like it can be loud. It's the 39 can provoke people, like I'm 7 centers defined through single definition, and I have every motor. So when I'm going and I'm in alignment with the right thing, like I'm just, and I'm in my power. If I'm not necessarily in alignment, but all that energy's firing, it can be intense and it can be big, and he can feel every little nuance of everything. But we just giggle because he literally, it's like my mouth on his father's appearance. I just call him, I'm like, all right, JJ, because once he gets started talking on something, he will just keep going and going and going.
Right.
And his Chiron 61. So why? why. 61 loves to ask why. And you know, we call it also like one of the direct connects to source, as you know, with the 64 being, you know, another one.
Yeah, it's one of the 3 gates in the head center or crowns.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, and he's my kid. So he'll come down and he'll be like, Mom. And mind you, this is like 4 and 5 years old. You know, time's not real. This calendar is man made. And I'm like, yes, Boo Bear, but can mommy have some coffee first before we talk about that? Because they're like, yep, there's
Right.
JJ Jr. coming down. Like, you know, this time. And me being the manifesting generator, time is not real. They're restraining me with these calendars. And so it just makes me giggle. But yeah, but you know, in having him, but it's interesting to know that at the core of my being, I'm my natal chart. Like that is me. This is my experience having a near-death chart. Like I'm still my natal chart. It's the core of my being. It's who I am. But I really do feel the imprints. And it's interesting to go from a 7 center defined chart to having to feeling the imprint of a 3 center defined chart. So while I don't amplify energy, I don't, because I just don't in my natal chart, but yet.
Well, you would in your head and your.
Yeah, my head and my.
Right. Is he defined? Yeah. He's not defined in the head and ajna, right?
No, just the spleen.
But you don't define it together or anything? No. You said he has the 61, but probably
head.
not.
Yeah, I think we define the ajna, but I don't think we define.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, we keep the head open, but it's yeah, I lost where I was going. But I ramble, so yeah, but it's
okay. So you had him 19 years ago. You had all that. So, and you said you started your experience with human design about how many years ago? So he was young.
Yeah, I am a blessed individual because I have had Karen on my side with my triple 28er. And she even told me, she's like, she looked at his chart and she's like, are you, is homeschool a possibility for you? I don't know how you feel about it. She's like, but just, I'm just letting you know, and I will never tell you what to do. But when I look at this chart, she's like, this is just something and now granted, mind you, we're more friends. So she's, this might not be what she says in a reading, but what she said to me as her friend is, I'd really consider if it's an option for you homeschooling him when I see his chart and the configurations of it. And which makes sense, now that I understand more.
Right.
And when I look at his chart, I'm like, and then I was able to, I caught a lot of shit. I mean, I checked my sacral and of course it said, but it's really funny the shit I caught for homeschooling an only child. And then I can't be like, well, his chart says that this is actually,
right.
I'm also now.
Yeah, people have so much judgment on how you raise your kid, right?
I know, it's amazing.
It's funny because I'm, in my, I don't know, like, how you just have these open head nausea things where like just some weird random inspiration thing came in. And I was actually thinking today, it would be really cool if I could find someone to have on the show, and on this podcast, that was someone who had been using human design since they were maybe at least a teenager or younger. And how that has impacted them. I'd really love to hear the story of what it's like to be raised to know who you are energetically in that way. So I just think that that's such a gift because as a mom, when you see that I've mentioned many times, I have a daughter's cross attention manifester, splenic, and I was always telling her, go upstairs and think about what you're doing and don't rush to make a decision, or where are you going? Stop, explain yourself. And all these things that were just like getting her so into her head when she's meant to just trust and do, right? And all these things. And she's meant to push me. And I was slowing her down. And I'm not saying that to beat myself up. I'm just saying I know that so much of what I did too, there were a lot of times where my intuition knew that I needed to just let her do stuff. But everybody else was like, why are you? And this whole thing. And like, well, I would. And then you start to question yourself, right? And then that open ajna was needing to be certain. Well, am I certain I'm not screwing her up by letting her have all this freedom? And all this stuff. And turns out I was probably screwing her up more from not, and she's not screwed up, where everybody has their lessons and their things they need to do. I don't mean to use that language, and then the other thing is she does have that channel of struggle, that 28-38. So she's meant to find meaning through all of that. And, but that whole idea that when we don't know, and we think, this whole do unto others as you would have done unto you. No, that's not always right, because you are not them. And that's what we often do. I think that very bit of advice.
Yeah. And I will tell you, it is so beautiful. Like, I think as moms, we're always going to question, did I do it right? Or we have things like that where you think back and you're like, oh man, if I knew this sooner, because now I know that maybe I could have, but which I still love how everything is always as it's meant to be, because maybe even the times that you did try to hold her back was part of the struggle for her, right? Mm-hmm. That's part of her learning. That's part of her mastering the energy of the 28-38. To see my son so weirdly, at times awkwardly, he's so unconditioned by so many things. And don't get me wrong, he has his friends and he will, in their field, they, so he's not like this perfectly innocent, unconditioned child. Like, we're going to get conditioned. It just is, it's life. Like, we're, it's just part of this program we're in at times. But to yet still see like that part of him that's unapologetically him, that's because he doesn't know any better other than to be him. He doesn't know how to be any other way.
Right.
I just like, when I remind myself that that's a gift I've given him through being able to know his design and raise him as best I can, just letting him flow and struggle. It's so hard to let him struggle. But like,
that's a hard thing as a mom, right? Watching our kids struggle. But then I've recently really had a reframe where I realized that and it's hard with anyone we love, right? We want to fix things for everybody we love. We know the answers. And as a projector, I especially feel like, oh, I know what you need to do. Right. But I really reframed that whole thing of like, instead of feeling like, oh, let me, it's like, oh yeah, I know. And I'm going to watch because they know too. And I want to empower them to feel that they have been the one who guided themselves through it, not feel like, oh, I told them how to get through it, and that's a tricky balance, because we often want to be like, here you go, this is what you need to do. And then that is not empowering, that is directing.
Yeah.
We're already over the top of the hour. How did this go by so fast?
I know. I was so afraid I wouldn't have anything to say. And then.
Yeah. But so Jamie, if people want to work with you, what's the best way for people to find you? I know you've got both your flower essences and then also the quantum alignment stuff. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Probably my website, just because they'll have the contact form. So either potionlady.com or my name, JamilaJamie.com, or it's the easiest ways to remember, and ones to just, find me, reach out. I'm happy to just talk, answer any questions people may have if they're curious about. They do all kinds of things.
Right. Okay. That's really cool. So yeah, the potionlady.com is a cool site. I'm going to have to go there because I need and look at some more stuff, because there's definitely some things you talked about that sounded, I'm very drawn to the sunshine theme. My dad used to always sing "You Are My Sunshine." So that's like a touching thing for me.
My mama for me.
Yeah. So
yeah. I won't get down that rabbit hole. I have a whole
right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Your thing.
Well, right.
Sunday.
Every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I would love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free human design chart and find all the ways to connect with me directly. And don't forget to please follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And if it feels aligned, please take a moment and give me a 5-star review. It really does help. And now my podcast is eligible to be supported. So if this has brought value to you, and if you feel aligned, there is a way to monetarily support the podcast that's available on that as well. So Thank you so much, Jamie. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me and making the time.
Peace out, everybody.